Hello and welcome back to Seaside Garage. No, this is not mine, unfortunately. A viewer of the channel, Michael, is a like-minded soul who likes to wrench on old cars. He likes to find them in barns and revive them, just like me. He found this together with another Benz. This has been standing in a barn as far as, if I remember correctly, since 1999. And he revived it, got it through an MOT, did a lot of rust work, but he's having an issue with it. It could be a bit complicated, but who knows? And if I can't fix it, then it has just been fun to try to work on a Benz once again. And yeah, but maybe I can fix it. And one of the very positive things is, even though I can't fix it, I will have to take it for a test drive to know for sure if I have fixed it or not. And oh, that's such a shame because it's such a tough car to drive around in. It's really uncomfortable. Well, I really like these cars, so it would be nice to take it for a spin. Some of you who has been following my channel for a long time will know that I have worked on these a couple of times before. A white 300 TD and a green 2.3 petrol and another one as well, I think. Sometimes I really hate working on these and sometimes I really enjoy them, but I can feel that I really want to own one of these. Only the estates. I would really like an estate because as a family car, it just seems as a brilliant choice when you still want to keep some of that classic car feel and don't just buy something boring that makes everything slightly gray. This would be a perfect car for that. And the reason why I sometimes dislike these cars is that they are really tough to work on. And that is mainly down to the fact, and that's not actually true, it just got some areas that are really tough. Rust work on these, I think, is really tough because you have to remove so much stuff and there are so many layers and stuff. And another thing is I've changed the front springs on one of these a while back, and it's just a very unpleasant thing to do, to be honest. You need the right tools for sure, and it's just a lot of tension that you work with. But that is also the good thing about these cars, because they are built like 400% more rigid than they had to be. And that's the reason why they just go on forever. This car, this one, got 500,000 kilometers on the clock. And if you look into the interior, it is very barn find-like and very moldy smelling, and I would really like to use my vacuum extractor, but Michael wants to do that himself. I can respect that. I can understand that because it's so satisfying. But apart from the moldiness and the dirt, I'd say it looked like an interior that got around maybe 100 Ks on it, if it was from another car. If it was a Citroen, for instance, all the plastic bits would have fallen off by now. Everything would have cracked. The steering wheel would be loose. The gear knob would be able to spin. You know, all that kind of stuff. And you know me, I like Citroens. It's not in a bad way. It's just this quality of the Merc. It's just amazing, to be honest. And listen to this. Yeah. But this car got a problem. And hopefully I can fix it. And yeah, maybe in a future video, in a drive video, I will make a little walk around this car and show you the interior and all that. But this video will be about the technical problem on this car. It got two problems as I see it. It could be many more, but I feel that I'm going to tackle two issues. What Michael wants me to do is to get it to run right. Right now, it's not running very nicely. It drives really nicely, but idle is really bad. And I'd say also that startup is really bad. So we have an issue with the starting. And I, of course, am thinking that we have an issue with the glow plugs. It is a 5-pot, 3-liter engine with a turbo. It's the 300 TD. I have a feeling that we have glow plugs, of course. Did I say spark plugs? Anyway, glow plugs. It got 5 glow plugs, and I think we only have 3, maybe 4 working on this car. It is giving the symptoms of an old big diesel engine that just doesn't get enough heat into one of the cylinders to fire it up. Then it has to run for a long time before that one comes back to life by normal heat of the compression, and then it kicks in. That's my feeling. So I think the hard starting issue is down to that. But even when the car has been driven for maybe 40 kilometers, it still idles really badly. Shaking, it sounds like it's maybe running on only 4. And I don't know what that is. I don't expect that to be glow plugs, because this is an old school diesel. I'm pretty sure it just preheats, and then it's just no more glow plugginess going on. So what I think hopefully is an issue is maybe there is a rack damper thingy on the pump. Maybe it's that. Maybe it's air in the system. It could be compression problem on one of the cylinders, and I really hope that's not the case, but it got 500,000 kilometers on the clock, and for some reason it was parked up in a barn in 1999. That could be because they wasn't really worth a lot back then, but it could also be because it has some engine problems. If one of the pistons is down on compression, it is going to be a problem. But what I want to do now is to remove all 5 glow plugs and put them on the bench and test them one by one to find out if all of them works. I expect 2 of them to be not working, but let's see. I'll just take them out and take you back when I'm on the bench. So I just about got the last of the glow plug out, and now I realized that I've been making videos for quite some years now, and it's amazing that I still forget stuff like this. It would have been nice to show you how it started before I took out the glow plugs, because now you don't really know what the problem was. But when I started it, if I let the glow plugs glow, of course, and wait until it's stopped, it will fire up, but it would run really rough, it would smoke, and unless I gave it throttle, it would cut out. So here we have all the glow plugs in the order that I took it out of the engine. This is the cylinder number 1, I would call it, the front engine, and then backwards. I am going to guess that this and this glow plug is not working, because they look kind of weird comparing it to the others. Like this, comparing to this black one. So let's just see. Maybe they all just work. I kind of hope to see 2 not working, because that would make completely sense in my book. Let's test the first one. That is working. I was expecting it not to be working. Oh, what a bummer. They all work. I was not expecting that. I did check that current actually goes to the glow plugs when I put ignition on, so that's not the case either. Okay, with all the glow plugs back in the engine, let's start it up. Actually, I cheated a little bit, so it's slightly hot. But what we're going to do now is to start it up, and you can hear how it runs. It's running rough. What we're going to do is to open each injector nut at the top, one at a time, to find out if anything changes. If nothing happens, then we will have a problem at that cylinder. Before doing that, I'm going to depress this, which means that it won't be able to start. Then I'm going to crank it, because I want you to hear something. This is the emergency stop of the engine. I don't know if it's actually an emergency stop, but it is a stop. So when that is depressed, the fuel pump will not deliver fuel. This should keep it from starting. I'm going to leave the microphone out here. Okay, so I don't really think this test is going to work, because it's getting fuel, so it's trying to start slightly anyway. But when I tried cranking it before with the cold engine, without letting the glow plugs heat up, I was getting a slight uniform cranking sound, like a diggity 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 diggity. That could be an engine trying to start, but it could also be a dead cylinder. So I'm a bit worried about the compression on this engine. They are known to eat piston rings. I don't know if they are known to do that, but they are known to drive for a lot of kilometers. Of course, at some point they will wear out. But now I'm going to start it up, and then I'm going to crack open one at a time to see if it changes the idle. And if so, then I think we'll be looking at a problem for sure. It can be different things, but then we'll know where to look. As you could see, it did not make any difference on cylinder number 2 and number 4 when I cracked loose that union up there, but diesel did come out, so that tells me that the fuel pump is most likely okay. It could be wrong pressure, of course, but it is delivering fuel. For some reason, the cylinders are just not firing. It could be the injectors not spewing in the fuel into the actual bore. It could be low compression. It could be... what else could it be? I actually don't really think it can be anything else than that just now, but it can be caused by different things. One thing I could do right now, and I'm not really going to do that, not as the first thing, because Michael did change all the injectors, I think for new ones actually, so I'm not expecting them to be bad. One thing though, he did flush the tank, he told me, and there was a lot of crap in the tank, and I can see down in the filter that we have some crap in it once again, but I don't see anything flying around in the lines after the filter, so don't think that's the problem, but it could be debris. It could be debris in the injector, for instance. One thing I could do now was to take out the injector and move it to another position and see if the problem moves together with the injector. If it does that, then we got an injector problem. I would, of course, need some new flame shields, I think it's called, between the injector and the block if I swap them around, so I don't have them. So I would like to not do that if I can avoid it. But another thing, the compression could be low on those two cylinders. That could be caused of a blown head gasket. I am seeing a bit of white smoke at the exhaust, so it could be, but I don't really feel any high pressure, and it doesn't seem to use any coolant. I don't think it's the head gasket. It could also be worn out cylinders, as I talked about earlier, 500,000 kilometers. So the compression could just be low. I think it's supposed to be between 300 and 400. I think from new it was 400 psi. It's a lot because it's a diesel. If it goes too low, below 300, 250, I'm not sure, it won't be able to ignite the diesel. Of course, a diesel engine ignites with the compression and the compression heat. So if it's too low, it won't work. But low compression could also be because of misadjusted valves. If the valves are very tight, for instance, it won't work. It will be a little bit open maybe, and the compression will be low by that. I don't expect that to be the problem, because Michael did tell me that he have adjusted the valves, but he was not completely sure he did it the right way. So I'm going to check that. What is really interesting is I told Michael just before that I thought maybe we have an issue with the compression, or it's pointing towards compression issues. And then he sent me a video clip of this engine not that long ago running perfectly. And he told me that he has been suspecting compression as well, but it is puzzling him that it could run that nice just a few weeks back. That is a really good video for me to see, because that is kind of weird if it's a compression issue. So hopes are getting back. Okay, so the coolant temperature is at the moment below 20 degrees. So I can check it according to the manual. It's below or above 40. I think it's best to do on stone cold engine, but this is not a fine adjustment. It's just a checkup. I just checked the intake. That's just fine. Now I turned the engine over for the exhaust. And unfortunately, that is also fine. I've only checked one cylinder. I haven't checked the other one. But if I would have compression issues due to valve adjustment, it would have to be tight or extremely loose, but it's not. It's within an acceptable level. So unfortunately, I do not believe we have any issues with the valve train. Okay, so it is the next day, and as mentioned before, this video will be very edited down. I have been doing a lot of stuff around this car, fault finding and so on, that is not included in this video, so it will be a bit jumpy. But after finding out that the valves was just as they were supposed to be, I have been checking the injection system. It feels as though the pressure on that one is slightly lower, but I don't think so. But I'm coming to a point where I have to do something that I should maybe have done a while back, but sometimes it's, at least in my opinion, it's a good idea to take the easiest steps along the way before admitting that there is something wrong that needs to be addressed, if that makes sense. You know when you see a bubbling area on a car, on your car, and you do know, if you think about it, that if you poke your finger will go right through that rust hole. But anyway, you don't do it. You just let it sit, and then maybe it will be all right, but it won't. I think we are at that stage with this engine, because there is something wrong with this engine that is more severe than I think. At least I think so. But what I have done right now is I have rigged up my leak down tester on cylinder number 2. And I want to show you what I found. This is wired in through the glow plug, and yeah, let me show you what I found, and then let's put some pressure on to that cylinder. Maybe you can hear that air is escaping at least. Let me show you what happens if I plug up this hole and take out the dipstick. I'm just going to put the mic close to this point. You hear the bubbling? You see? And you see that it's being filled with air. This air is coming through the cylinder, past the rings, and down onto the into the crankcase, or through a crack somewhere, but most likely through that. This is what you would call blow-by on an engine. It's not a very precise test, because if it runs, it runs. Then it will just be a matter of how much oil it's going to use. But there is a lot of leak down through the rings on this cylinder number 2. But what I want to do to confirm a bit more is I'm going to make a compression test on this. A good engine is supposed to give 400 psi, and 300 should be the lower, should be the lowest that is acceptable. I think at one point you will just get too little compression for the diesel to auto ignite, and then it won't run. Okay, so now I am a bit confused. I did prove that we did get some blow by. What I don't know is if it's normal. So I did rig up my compression tester, but I only have a compression tester for petrol engines. Diesel engines get quite high compression. But because I thought that this one would be broken, I was expecting to see maybe 250 psi or something like that. Take a look at this. After cranking for, I think, 4 to 5 revolutions, I am showing I am beyond 300, and I'd say this is most likely 340 or something like that. It's not all the way up. I'm not going to go any higher than this because it's not rated for this, so it is too much. But it's good compression. There's nothing wrong with this compression as far as I know. So I am back to square one. I just know that this piston is not firing, but this compression is just fine. So I was on a wild goose chase for a minute there. I was actually almost ready to call Michael and tell him that he had a low compression issue on the engine after the leak down test. But I think maybe that's just acceptable blow by on a diesel engine. And you know what? Piston ring will not completely hold pressure no matter how good they are. They will let pressure by. I was just not expecting to be able to hear bubbling down here. But of course the pressure has to go somewhere, and normally it will just go through the breather system and into the intake. So I was maybe getting a false positive or negative or whatever you're going to say about that test. This is good enough to run at least. It should be able to run on this. Maybe it will burn oil and all that, but it should run just fine with this compression. I'm going to put everything back together and start from scratch, I think. It seems as though it was idle speed related. Okay, so it's been a couple of weeks since the last clip you just saw. I at least was satisfied with the idle at the end. It was a lot better. And all the cylinders reacted when I loosened up the injectors, so I know that all the cylinders was firing at that point. I sent a video to Michael showing him how it was running. He was satisfied with that. We agreed on a time that he could go and pick it up again. When that day arrived, he came and we went to start it up, and it was just running like a bag of nails. It was just completely back. Maybe even slightly worse at startup, at least. When it was a bit hot, it was better. But it was not even close to being as it was on that last video clip. So slightly embarrassed. We looked at the engine together, and we actually noticed that air bubbles was in the fuel line coming from after the prime pump into the filter area. I actually noticed that already the first time I worked on the car. But after tightening up that fuel pump, primer pump, it stopped, so I wasn't really worried about that. But seeing that those air bubbles was back, we thought that maybe that was the issue. So we decided that Michael would go home, buy a new pump and put that in, and then most likely the problem would be solved. He called me 2 days later. He changed the pump, and it was exactly the same. luckily for me, Michael is a good sport about all this because this is his hobby just as mine. It seems as though we are quite similar in our approach to these cars. We both know that we might end up having a more complicated problem on this engine. We're just trying to avoid that conclusion for as long as possible because maybe there's something more simple. But he changed the pump, it didn't work. The fuel filters was gumming up with crap again. I told him that I could see a lot of debris in the clear filter. He had cleaned the fuel tank out quickly once, but he decided to remove the fuel tank altogether and clean it out right. There was a lot of crap in that fuel tank. And what is really weird about this car is that it's pulling really strongly. It's the fastest 300 TD that I have driven. That's for sure. It's really got a lot of pulling power. It's just that idle area that is a problem. After the fuel tank flush, it was running exactly the same. So to just be sure that everything was all right, Michael decided to take all of the injectors out again and put in new flame traps or the washer thingies on them, because they need to be changed every time you take out the injector. That had not been done on this. Some of the injector, especially cylinder number 2, was really gummed up. So he cleaned it up, put new washers in there, and put it all back together, and it was running exactly the same. So he called me up and asked me if he could swing by and leave the car here for a while again, because he was running out of ideas. He is getting pretty close to swapping the engine on this one, because as my video also confirmed, there is a lot of blow-by on this engine, which is of course a problem, but I'm puzzled about the pulling power of this engine. It really doesn't feel like a worn-out engine, but maybe that blow-by allows enough oil to be sucked up into that cylinder to make it idle weird. I'm really not sure, but I'm going to make another attempt to fix this issue with the idle. The car is smoking slightly on idle. It's not really smoking at full throttle, so I'm having a hard time understanding that it should be piston rings that is causing this. But right now, I'm without a clue. And the Ford Escort is on the lift, so it will just be standing here for a while, and then I will try to tackle it once more. But what I would like to ask you guys is that I know a lot of you are experienced mechanics. Some of you are diesel mechanics. What do you think? What should be the next step on this fault finding on the Benz? Because maybe we are lucky that it's something more simple. I just don't know. But take a listen to it. I don't know how well it picks up. The ending credits will be the engine a bit closer with the mic, so you can hear how it's running. All I can say is that a bit of throttle clears it up pretty nicely. A bit of smoke. It's slightly cold right now. But the idle, it's 4 cylinders. Maybe even 3 from time to time. What do you think is the problem? I could use some advice on this one, that's for sure. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.